specific, I really wanted to pick a specific topic, which I think will resonate for every one of us, whether as individuals or as businesses, to be fair. The whole devastating change that happened in the last 2 years and how to get ahead of the curve, I think, is at the top of everybody's mind, whether through skilling up or using skills in a different way. To make the most out of sudden changes that took place. So that's what I will be discussing. A quick introduction. I'm one of the sales leaders at Amazon Web Services. I'm specifically focused on healthcare and academic medicine research. Been in IT over 20 years with work experience in USA, UK, Europe, Middle East, had exposure to practically every market in this industry. So thank you for having me as a speaker. Here we go. Let's see. So obviously 2020, 2021, incredibly challenging period for every one of us globally. So many people lost their loved ones or got sick themselves. We also saw many of our favorite local businesses close down or downsize. Many industries and people working in these industries got impacted by the global pandemic. So today I want to talk about how to create a culture that helps you adapt quickly to changes. Again, whether as an individual or as a business or a business unit. So these changes can be things like, sudden changes can be as a result of, COVID, or it can be as a result of an economic downturn, or any sudden changes in consumer habits or expectations. I mean, in this day and age, I think with the advanced technology, I think every one of us is expecting sudden left turns every year. So when we look at data, which is apart from the people who work for them, the second most important asset, in my opinion, for any organization. So data continues to grow, pandemic or not. IDC tells us by 2023, more than 40% of the world's data will be sitting on hyperscale or cloud data centers. So this means much of the data that the companies own and utilize will end up in a public cloud somewhere. So when you look at the changes that took place in the last, say, 18 months to 2 years, multiple industries had major revenue loss due to COVID. Hospitals, when you look at hospitals, elective procedures in hospitals was put on hold. There was a sudden shift and need for enhanced digital health engagements. Or if you look at universities needing to handle major spikes in remote learning and education. All of these were unplanned. If you asked a lot of these organizations in 2019, they didn't know what was coming in 2020. So if you look at restaurants and retail, every one of these industries had to enhance their online ordering and deliveries. And when you look at it, traditional way of doing things, IT companies, a lot of the traditional IT companies had trouble to fill orders, because when you look at it, the entire manufacturing and the transportation industry was affected, let alone, installing and managing new kit that the companies were ordering. So we have seen a massive shift to cloud models because of that. So, culture. Uh, I always say this to my teams as well as when I'm speaking to customers. Any given change, any given innovation starts with culture. If you have the culture that allows people to innovate within your organization, the change and the scale can be very different than what we are accustomed to in a traditional organization. So I'm going to be talking about, why is culture important in digital transformation? I'll also talk about, what does a strong digital culture look like? And how do we get started? Again, whether as an individual or as a company or a business unit. So let's talk about digital culture. So when we talk about digital culture, when we talk about digital transformation in an organization, the typical version everybody thinks about is climbing a ladder. You make big preparations, you get your team together, you get your strategy together, you work towards a very one-way road, basically. It's the typical version everybody thinks about is climbing a ladder. So it's a long process, requires significant funding, and it's usually in one direction. The company knows where they want to get to. After long planning stages and resourcing, they go in that direction. So also, the bigger the organization, the longer this ladder-like transformation takes place. So you will hear words like, it takes a long time for a big ship to change course. So what we understand from digital transformation today is very different. It's agile, it's bi-directional, and you can scale up and down. And the size of your organization is not a handicap if you start with the culture. So the people in your organization are the driving force behind any digital transformation. And not getting the culture right, the consequences of not aligning culture can be very fatal to a lot of the organizations. So we use words like, democratizing access, democratizing data, democratizing the tools in your organization. And this is really true for every industry. So the consequences of not aligning culture, one of the most interesting examples I always give is iPhone announcement at a time that Nokia was an undisputed industry leader. So you don't know where the disruption is coming from. You don't know when the disruption is coming from. If you are not continuously innovating your offerings, your engagements, your model and culture, then the negative impact of a change can be fatal for your organization. So the inability to continuously innovate, can result in productivity and revenue loss. You are going to have an enormous disconnect between business and IT leaders. While it's incredibly important to have security and governance, guardrails in place, a clear understanding of business objectives, and IT departments serving those objectives is essential to business transformation. So strategy coming from business and technology that enables the execution of that strategy by IT leaders is critical. And also the agility to innovate. The Nokia iPhone example I gave is applicable to pretty much every industry. You know, Blockbuster Video comes to mind. So agility to innovate, the bias for action, is incredibly important parts of the digital transformation. So through the presentation, I will talk about one-way and two-way doors later on. And it's up to you to decide when to move fast and when to move slow. So what does a strong digital culture look like? So innovation should be at the heart of a good, strong digital culture. You should always look at advancing your offerings. You should always look at whether improving existing technologies or creating brand new technologies to meet the business goals, also to meet your consumers' expectations. It needs to be flexible. Not everything requires long planning. Not everything will require enormous investment upfront. So you have to look at a flexible model where you can scale up and scale down at will. It needs to be customer-centric. The customer expectations today are changing incredibly rapidly. Whether you are a university student, you are unable to go to a classroom, but you are going through your MBA, or you are a patient that needs to see a doctor, but you are unable to meet face-to-face. The expectations can change overnight, and your organization should be in a position to adapt very quickly. It's also collaborative. When I talked about business leaders and IT leadership working together, that is the heart of a successful digital transformation. If it's led with one and stalled by the other, it's never going to be successful. It also has to be bold. Not everything will be a complete success. So you need to make decisions on what are the big plays that you want to take and what are the smaller risks you want to take. But it's very important to look at risk-taking as an important part of your digital culture, certainly in this day and age. So how do I establish a strong digital culture? So a lot of the organizations, certainly speaking historically, whichever size they may be, they could be startups, they could be very established big companies. The strategy always came from the top. The talent was hired and the technology was acquired to deliver that strategy. Culture of the organization was something that was viewed as outside of this triangle. The strategy, talent, technology was continuously feeding each other, and culture was something people talked about, but it was never at the center of the execution and in this triangle. So it's incredibly important to create the right culture, so the strategy you create enables that culture, the talent you hire nurtures that culture, and technology you acquire underpins that culture. It's incredibly important for success. So how do you create change in your organization? It really starts with defining the goals. In certainly my organization, defining the goals almost always starts with the customer. So your organization is ready and enabled to meet with continuously evolving customer expectations. And customers can expect things that are brand new in the market. Customers can expect things that are very much required due to an unforeseen circumstances in the world, or they could be looking for a solution which doesn't even exist today. So you have to cover all your bases. Your organization will support and execute this strategy. So how you organize within your own company or within your own team is very important. Communication. In fact, I often use the word over-communicate. It's better to communicate regularly and openly than having, long silences in an organization. What that communication will help you is if there are any changes that are taking place to the strategy or organization, people know it is coming, and also why it is coming and why it's related to the strategy. So communication, very important. Encouraging people to innovate, encouraging people to take calculated risks, encouraging people to take ownership is incredibly important in your organization. And finally, but not the least, is training. Constant training, constant learning. So you create an organization while it needs to adapt to sudden changes, you provide the culture and the enablement to train and learn new things so they can adapt to changes very quickly. So everything, like I said, starts with the culture. I've talked about the customer obsession piece. If you start with what your customer wants and focus on delivering that and hiring people to deliver that and supporting a belief system that a customer obsession with strong focus on constant change and continuous training and enablement is going to produce results is very important. Mechanisms in place. The usual things we hear in stale organizations is it's how we have done things for so long, right? They don't necessarily see a burning platform, or they don't necessarily anticipate changes. So creating mechanisms to create the right behavior for innovative thinking is very important in your organization. Architecture, I cannot emphasize this enough. Traditional way of technology supporting organizations was very much procure, deliver, install, and utilize. And a lot of these required significant upfront investments or multi-year commitments. When you look at the number of startups that we see in the market in the last 20 years versus the number of successful startups that we've seen previously, the result is largely due to cloud computing. When a lot of entrepreneurs and startup owners create their companies, none of them require significant big upfront investments on technology. None of them require multi-year commitments, which really changes the game, especially when you are starting your business with limited cash flow at the very beginning. And I'll talk about organization. In Amazon speak, this is 2 pizza teams, but how to expand on that is Amazon is not very big on monolithic decision-making chain. Everything doesn't funnel into a single decision maker. What happens is there are a lot of small and empowered teams that they own what they create. And due to the nature of a lot of these small and empowered teams, innovation doesn't stop, but also the organization takes calculated risks that these small investments, some of them will produce amazing results, others may not be able to produce amazing results, but all eggs are not in one basket. Also, simplifying. If you look at even the most basic things as how can I make my customer's life easy? Is next day delivery a great simplification? Absolutely. Is next 3 hours delivery an even bigger simplification? Absolutely. So always looking at simplifying the customer experience, always looking at making things less painful for the stakeholders is always going to be appreciated. And taking ownership and creating those changes are going to be incredibly important for your own organization. Speed. I've talked about Blockbuster. I've talked about iPhone. I've talked about Nokia. You can look at the history of businesses. 9 out of 10, some of the biggest and the best companies have failed, not because they were not producing amazing products or amazing experiences for their customers, but they have failed because they were unable to adapt and change quickly. And there are two ways to look at this. One is you lead the change. And there are a lot of companies that are massive innovators, game changers, big disruptors in the industry. But then there are a lot of other organizations who have seen where the market is going or what the market expectations are and have managed to change very quickly to adapt to those changes. So when you look at your decision-making process, and this is very important, especially for senior leaders in your organizations. If you look at every decision as a big risk, you create an incredibly risk-averse culture. And when that company needs to adapt or change, they will not be able to adapt and change quickly. We see two types of decisions in business. One we call one-way door, and the other one is called two-way doors for us. So one-way doors are big decisions that requires big investment, and the implication of failure as a result of that decision can be fatal for the business. It could ruin your reputation, it could ruin your finances, and it could ruin your market standing. There will be many, many decisions you need to take which are going to be like this. But I would argue there will be a lot of other decisions, other changes, other innovations that you will be able to bring to your organization where the actions are reversible. We call those two-way doors. It's very much an experiment. It's very much, perhaps getting into new markets, perhaps creating brand new products, perhaps opening a brand new office in a new geo. And they could be even smaller decisions. While it doesn't disrupt your main business, it could open brand new revenue opportunities for your organization. So nurturing these two-way doors where it is fairly easy to reverse, the investment upfront is negligible for your organization, and it's not going to have catastrophic results for your organization. You need to be very agile in taking those decisions. And then you need to be also very agile in addressing any of the failures as a result of that. The whole fail fast methodology. So I've covered this one already. So this portion is very Amazonian. It's very tried and tested. I really want to cover this a little bit. So every innovation, every product, every market decision that we take is working backwards from the customer. So it's very important to understand, sometimes that who is the customer is incredibly important. That who is the customer may not be immediately the company or the consumer group that you are doing business with. Sometimes it's a chain. Sometimes you need to look at your customer's customer and create the right chain to solve a problem. And again, it could be a customer problem you are addressing or an untapped opportunity that your customer wants to look into. This could be co-developing something. It could be going to market together, or it could be literally solving a problem to help them out. So the customer benefit, this is really important. Sometimes we focus on problems. They may be perceived to be big problems. Sometimes we focus on opportunities. They may be perceived to be big opportunities, but it's incredibly important to have a business plan with clear business outcomes, documented, studied, and examined. So when you start your journey to solve a problem or address an opportunity, you have a clear view of what the benefit of doing that is. It could be financial benefit, it could be reputational benefit, it could be learning new skills benefit, but you need to know what that benefit is. And then, how do you know what your customers need or want? Now, this is very, very, very difficult in a lot of the cases. And in other cases, it's not. When you look at a market opportunity, if you look at where people are struggling, and if there was something new, or if there was an improvement to an existing situation, people would want to hear what that would look like. That would create the right thinking. The most recent example I can give is the new cashless markets that we introduced. I was reading on LinkedIn, one of my contacts, he went to a football game, and it took him 7 minutes to get a beer with a cashless system in the stadium. So if any one of you wanted to grab a beer in a crowded stadium and it took you 7 minutes, I think you would look at it as a major improvement and you would want that. So finding out what customers need or want could even be based on your own personal experiences. And then again, what does the customer experience look like? 7 minutes to grab a beer. I'm able to go back to my game quickly. It has value to me because I came here to watch a football game. So a clarity of that experience, what that would look like, is also incredibly beneficial in building your business case. And we have this methodology very much from the start in all our customer engagements. We really want to look at things as strategic engagements, and this whole working backwards process defines and underpins our engagements. And why cloud? All these examples I gave, the technology piece is underpinned by cloud architecture, because if nothing else, it allows for instant experimentation. Your upfront payment, your time to market, and skilling up can be very quickly. Your total cost of ownership can be very low. You can start very slow. And because of that, it lowers the cost of failure. Cloud enables those two-way doors. Cloud enables those easier business decisions. Whereas previously, it may be everything was a one-way door. But if you lower the cost of failure, you are going to create an increased experimentation and innovation in your company. And then obviously, if something is actually working and you started small with an experiment, with cloud, you are able to scale and grow very quickly. And that also helps the cash flow. Once the financials are improved or the investment on a project is improved and it is a success, you are able to scale very rapidly. Again, how do you create these autonomous teams with strong ownership? We call these two pizza teams. Really depends on the pizza, I would say, and depends on how much people like pizza, I guess, in the team. But this is really 6 to 8 people teams at most. So small, decentralized, nimble teams, they own and run what they build. And they deliver results back to the organization, which also underpins the strategy, but doesn't create a monolithic decision-making process in the organization. Multiple streams of experimentation, multiple streams of trying new things will create a strongly adaptable culture, a very strongly adaptable organization, which will help you in the long term. Also, I've talked about experimentation. I've talked about lowering the cost of failure. Let's not be scared of failing. And failure and invention are inseparable twins. I think if you talk to any startup owner, if you talk to any entrepreneur, it's highly likely they have failed more than they've succeeded. But those failures are amazing learning grounds, as long as, obviously, you learn from them. So creating an organization which is not afraid of failing, especially on calculated risks, on two-way doors, is incredibly important. Obviously, failing on the one-way doors, as I discussed earlier, can be quite fatal. But not everything is a one-way door in your organization or in your practice. I mean, I can give my personal failures. I can give my company's interesting ventures in the market. If anybody remembers Fire Phone, if you were one of the 5 people who owned it, would remember that it wasn't a massive success. So people sometimes talk about Amazon's amazing success in the industry, but it also came with some substantial failures. But it did not disrupt, or it did not impact the mothership, which was the retail brand. So what does a successful digital transformation look like when the culture is aligned? So strategy, talent, technology, all of them working together with culture at the heart of it. So let's start with an education example, because education is one of the industries that got impacted big time in the last 2 years. So Arizona State University serves more than 130,000 students. They wanted new approaches for connecting virtually with students. And they created a model which is practically what a lot of the big universities, the Harvards, MITs of this world, had to go and adapt in the last 18 months, creating a video component for all their lectures, not just selective, you know, some of them mandatory classroom, the others distance learning. No, video component for almost all lectures now to better accommodate distance learning. They created an interactive live stream channel on the main Arizona State University website. And they introduced voice technology throughout the campus. Very innovative, very ready for what was coming for the industry in 2020 and 2021. Another one, Moderna. So Moderna, obviously, as you will know well, has delivered COVID-19 vaccine in warp speed and scaled its production globally at speed as well, all using AWS technology, cloud native manufacturing and research. So all the development of the diverse portfolio of mRNA-based vaccines and therapeutics were built on AWS. So when you look at the speed of research, the lower cost of starting and finishing a research, and then when we are talking about research, it's highly likely there will be multiple failures as well as successes. Lowering the cost of failure creates a great experimental, innovative culture. And last but not least, Genomics England. They are focused on cancer research. They transitioned from on-premise to cloud to give researchers reliable, comprehensive, secure and compliant access to massive data sets. If any one of you has worked in DNA or genomics research, you will know that the size of the data you are working with is enormous. And managing and looking after that data and working with that data can be very challenging. One of the reasons the drug research in this day and age has improved is because of cloud. What would have taken many years has gone down in terms of the research time in today's world. So plus with Genomics England, a secure collaboration with other institutions, which informs quicker drug development, similar to what happened with Moderna, is incredibly beneficial to everybody who is listening this, because we as the consumers and the patients get impacted by lack of speed in certain industries. And really, this is all I wanted to cover, really focusing on culture. If if I can leave some takeaways, the most important piece is strategy, talent, and technology needs to have culture at its heart, and that culture should nurture innovation, agility, and experimentation. So, thank you for having me as a speaker. Happy to take questions.
Wonderful. It's so much fun. Can you hear me, Deniz?
I can, yes.
Perfect. So what we will do next, first of all, we can accommodate a few questions. If anyone has questions from the audience or from the Zoom audience, from live audience or Zoom audience, right? And the next, we also will have Mentimeter exercise, interactive exercises, asking each other certain questions and picking the statistics. It's also fun. We're integrating some interactive networking opportunities while collaborative. Make sense? Okay, I can hear more people are entering, so let's have it interactive. Any questions? And I would like to ask, for example, Patrick or any of our co-hosts to unmute themselves and read out loud the chat, because I cannot see the chat if there are questions in the chat.
I don't see any questions so far in either the Slack or the chat.
Okay, thank you for monitoring this, Patrick. It's really highly appreciated. Let's see. Yes, if you do have a question, the question, I think it can pick your question, but can come closer. Okay.
What are some ways that Amazon takes its failures and uses analytics or whatever methods to launch a new initiative to be successful in the way it built in the last mission?
Deniz, can you hear it, or shall I repeat, or shall?
You should repeat it.
Yeah, please repeat it.
Okay, then let's do it. Come over, Dylan. Right?
Is that better? Can you hear it?
Slightly better.
Okay, come over. We want to see you too. Your real one, not Zoom one.
So can you hear now?
I can.
All right. So my question was, what are some ways that Amazon takes its failed initiatives and uses analytics or whatever methods to improve its next launch or next project to take some of those learnings away?
Absolutely. So thank you for the question. The important point is, as I said during the presentation, failures are excellent learning opportunities. I don't know if any one of you read the newest book by Michael Dell, Play Nice but Win. It's a great book, recommend it to everybody. In there, he says success is a bad teacher. So failures, if analyzed correctly, can be amazing learning opportunities, especially, like I said at the beginning, you know, even experimentations should have a good, solid business plan. And if the good, solid business plan didn't get executed, then you need to look at the whole triangle that I talked about: strategy, talent, and technology. Because you are looking at something that the consumers took to heart or didn't take to heart. So analyzing all three of them. So it may not just be strategy. It may not just be talent. It may not just be technology. It may be all of them. So if you examine the data, the result of why it failed and how big a failure is it is also an important question. I think is very important. And we do analyze all three of them, you know, strategy, talent, technology.
And you do that in the group setup, in collaboration inside the smaller team, two-pieces team, or like a large Amazon?
Depending on what has failed. If the small team's experimentation has failed, that small team will start with a business plan to go with. So even that small team in itself will have a strategy, will have the talent, and will have the technology. in place. That's 6 people team, 8 people team. So in that team, they will analyze what has failed and why it has failed. Absolutely.
Really cool. Actually, it reminds me of the startup culture, startup entrepreneurial, the beginning of the journey culture where you can prototype and pivot really quick, which I really love. But my question, when you work this way in such a big company like Amazon, doesn't it produce the chaos? Any kind of, can you still manage such a big company or find specific person or just orchestrate who is doing what, knowing who is doing what? How many people work in Amazon right now, in Amazon Cloud, for example, or Amazon?
Your guess is as good as mine. Thousands. Thousands. But the culture is a startup culture. So
Yeah.
that's why I talked about the most important thing is the culture. Culture needs to be at the heart of it. If you act like a company with thousands of people, and if you think like that, if you strategize like that, then you lose that magic touch that started you at the beginning. So one of the things you will hear from a lot of, all the Amazonians as a mantra is it's always day one. So always keep that startup mentality and, never get comfortable. Never get comfortable that you are a market leader or you are big today. There's always going to be a next Amazon coming up who is going to disrupt the market.
Excellent answer. I really like it. Thank you, Deniz. It was wonderful. And
Thank you.
Patrick, do we have any more questions coming from Zoom?
I do not see any. No.
Okay, Gerald has one question, and then we will have a couple minutes for our quick survey, okay?
Janice, you still there?
I am indeed.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what are some of the biggest roadblocks you encounter towards people changing the culture that they have, and what do you do to to overcome these roadblocks?
So are we talking about within my organization, or are we talking about, say, with customers per se, right? Because I have more obstacles with customer cultures than anybody else, to be honest. Especially when you are introducing change in the industry. I'll give you a personal example. So I'm one of those people that changed late. I was a very big BlackBerry fan in 2000s. And iPhone came out in 2007, I think. And in 2010, I was still just using BlackBerry. And my manager at the time mandated to his team that we are all working in technology. Nobody should be using BlackBerry anymore, and we should have iPhone as a company phone. And I resisted. I love my BlackBerry. I have an emotional connection to my BlackBerry, and I don't want to do anything with this new thing, iPhone, whatever it is. And he basically said to me, "Do you like your job? Because this change is going to happen, and you will adapt or not." Why am I giving this example? The minute I started using iPhone, I never looked back on BlackBerry. So it was an emotional connection that I didn't want to let go. And a lot of the big enterprise customer base that I talk to have that same emotional connection, that legacy connection. Unless somebody at the top says, "Do you like your job? Because I'm going to make some changes." That burning platform may not be in place. And that becomes the biggest obstacle. More often than not, I would argue, in the cloud industry, and this is not unique to Amazon, we are selling that disruption culture, that change, more so than we are selling a specific technology.
Oh,
It's the mindset.
The top down then. You're
Top
saying.
down. Top down. It has to be
Try it,
top
you
down.
like it.
Try if you like it. Never set comfortable.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Dennis. It
No
was,
problem.
I think it was really cool, right? You hybrid mode. Okay, now we will have some interesting exercise. John Sturman is facilitating the network.